So these are factors that led to Hitler's appointment as Chancellor of Germany. So the Nazis used a lot of different factors, the first one being effective use of campaigning and propaganda. All of this obviously thanks to Goebbels and his ministry. So the first one is using negative cohesion, in which he managed through a lot of promises and campaigning to join people from the left wing and from the right wing under the same promises and also against a common enemy. So, I mean, I'm going to get into this in another section, but they just put them against something that would join them together in hatred. Which, I mean, think about it. If you get left-wing extremists supporting the same party as right-wing extremists, that's really impressive. It wasn't that left-wing extremists. It wasn't like the KPD or anything, but they did get a lot of left-wing voters. Goebbels joined in the party because of the left wing. Rome, he was there from the beginning, but he was left wing. A lot of the Nazis were left wing. They just gradually moved to the right, but they initially were left wing. They had a lot of propaganda everywhere, posters, pamphlets with catchy images and slogans and the swastikas everywhere. You can walk out of your house and just not see a Nazi propaganda poster. It was everywhere. And also huge rallies and marches in which SA members were just walking, and they were very organized, and they was really impressed and stuck with normal people, because Germany had been in a time of chaos in this era, and they were looking for order. So if they saw a group of men who belonged to this political party who promised amazing things and also were really organized, they were definitely going to vote for them. And that's kind of how they got notable members like Albert Speer and, fun fact, his mom. They were impressed by a group of SA soldiers just walking, and they signed up for the party. So also the vague promises the Nazis made worked in their favor, because they were so vague. It could be taken either way, so you can interpret it one way, another person could interpret it a different way. But both those ways were positive, so you would say, oh, this means this, so I'm going to join the party because they agree with something I think, but the other person who thinks something completely different sees the same thing, interprets it their way, and joins the party too. So they were so vague, and these were in Mein Kampf and in the 25-point program, everywhere. And they were really vague, so vague. That's why they don't like politicians. They make vague promises, and I hate when they do that, because they gain a lot of support that way, but it's just, you're not promising something concrete. You just want something. You don't want a whole lot of, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. No, I want decisive action. So they had new technologies. They embraced the radio. They had 50 broadcasts in only the first year of the chancellery, but that was after Hitler got to power. Before, they still on the radio. They still made speeches, and they used the airplane. Hitler famously campaigned and went from one part of Germany to the next in just a matter of hours using an airplane, which again really impressed voters, because he could see them, most of them, he could meet them, and meeting a politician in person, I think, makes a great impact, because you're like, oh, he comes here, he talks to us, he cares about us, when in fact it's just political propaganda. Their policies were really fluid, and you gotta give them credit for they had one policy, right, and it was really unpopular, and Goebbels and Hitler and these people, so people didn't like it, and they were losing votes because of it. So they said, okay, we're going to remove this policy, put another one, a vague one, or something they knew would be supported, and just see how they like it. And if they liked it, they kept it. So they just kept the good policies and threw out the bad ones. But all of the policies they kept were in their favor, so they gained a lot of supporters that way. And that's kind of what some politicians do these days. I wonder where they got that idea. Again, the people weren't really impressed with the uniforms, the I mean, the order. In time of chaos, they just needed someone who would be there and would help structure the country in a way that wasn't just plain chaotic, like the Weimar politicians had done. I mean, this was during the Great Depression, right before, after, and that chaos, economic chaos. I'm gonna get into that later. Really was a gold mine for the propaganda ministry. They took advantage of that so much. Then, also, like Hitler managed to gain the support of important people. So, for example, say, and these days do it. For example, Lady Gaga endorsed Biden, and if you were an undecided voter but you liked Lady Gaga a lot and said, "Oh, I don't know who to vote," and you saw Lady Gaga supported Biden, you're gonna be like, "Oh, I'm gonna vote for him because Lady Gaga likes him." Well, to a greater extent, this was what the Nazis did. They gained the support of elites and celebrities and famous companies, so those would endorse them, and undecided voters who weren't that sure. So things they like the Nazis. So if your car company, if the guy who is on TV, if a lot of people like this party, it must be good, right? That's what they used. So that was effective campaigning and propaganda. The next factor was the failures of the Weimar Republic and politicians. The whole thing of the stab in the back myth that had really embedded German culture, and everyone in the country who felt betrayed just blamed the Weimar politicians who signed it, the November criminals. And the Nazis really exploited this. They took advantage of the death of Gustav Stresemann, a foreign minister who did wonders for the German economy. I'm gonna get into in a later video, but he did so many things, and he died in 1929. And people took faith of the Grand Coalition, this coalition which was going on in Germany at the time, and they took faith in it. That soon collapsed under Stresemann wasn't there, and Hitler wasn't there because he didn't like coalitions. So the coalitions soon collapsed and the political parties were chaotic. So Hitler took advantage of this. And he just saw people were unhappy and just wiggled around and promised one thing, promised another, and voila. So there were so many political parties in Germany, so many, and it made coalitions impossible. And also, they couldn't agree on anything, so there were constant elections. There were one in 1928, one in 1930, one in July 1932, another one in November 1932, and then another one in March 1933. So from 1928 to 1933, there were 5. And having too many elections in a short period of time, that's a sign of a failing democracy, because the parties can't cooperate with each other. So, and also, from February to October 1931, the Weimar Republic was the fascists were acting like children. They disagreed on everything, so they just straight up did not meet for over 9 months. They didn't February 9 months. They didn't meet at all. So people said they were practically living in an autocratic system, and this guy who seems to like autocratic systems wants to be up in power. Sure, fine, we're basically living in it anyway. So I'm gonna get into that a bit later, but yeah. Also, the way that the government hadn't invested properly in public services, education, transport, housing, that really weakened it. They also underestimated the Nazis. They didn't think someone who could gain that much power that quickly. They never really sought out what made Hitler and his speeches popular. So what the Weimar government did in 1920, around that time, they sent people to go in and watch the extremist party meetings, and that's how Hitler became a fanatic of the Nazi party. He worked for the Weimar government. He got sent into a NASDAQ meeting, and he just stayed. But they could have done that. They could have seen this massive political party who had this very captivating speakers and just sent someone there to assess what they were doing and then evaluate and see what they could do. But they didn't. Also, President Paul von Hindenburg just ruled by decree, especially so he was elected in 1925, and then he got re-elected in 1932, and he is ruled by decree a lot after that second period. So this is undermining democracy, because like, you're president, we're democratically elected, try to cooperate with other parties. But this one, he was over 80 years old. He was really, really old and just wanted peace, and the politicians weren't cooperating. And Chancellor's like ruining, and other politicians like Schleicher, von Papen, they just didn't agree and they didn't believe in parliamentary democracy. Like I was saying, it just really damaged the idea of the whole democracy thing. And people were like, okay, fine, you don't know how to use democracy, maybe we should just not use democracy. Well, that's what they did. So then the next one is the desire for a strong leader. So far we've done effective propaganda and campaigning, failures of the Weimar Republic, and now a desire for a strong leader. So due to the Hitler myth, Hitler was portrayed as this Christ-like figure, like the Messiah who was coming to save Germany from these weak politicians, from this economic chaos. And he was portrayed as a World War I hero. He won an Iron Cross. He was decorated on 6 occasions. And voters said, well, this is this veteran who wants to help us through this chaotic time. He fought for us. He risked his life. Why shouldn't we vote for him? He's this amazing candidate, right? He was very charismatic. There's pictures of him practicing with his arms like that. He really practiced his speeches, and he practiced arm movements. He practiced the way he was going to say things. He just knew how to get better and better and better in practice, and he was really captivating and had a really recognizable style. So nowadays, if you see someone talking really loudly, really aggressively, by moving their hands a lot and just shouting, you're just instantly going to be reminded of Hitler. And that kind of image is what stuck in people's heads. All the politicians were like, hey, so we're going to do this and this and this. Hitler was, no, we're going to do this. And that really stuck with the people, so that caused a strong impression. So, say undecided voters, they couldn't decide who to vote. They said, hey, I like that guy in that speech. He's running, right? I'm going to vote for him. Also, most people did believe in the nationalist ideas Nazis put forward. They did vote for him after all, but they did believe in Germany should be a global supremacy again. They believed in Lebensraum. He did have some supporters because of his ideology, but not many. The majority weren't because of that. Again, he stroked German nationalism by saying, I'm going to rip out the Treaty of Versailles. I'm going to destroy this, not destroy the democracy, but I'm going to destroy this weak political position they have let us in, these November criminals. I'm going to make Germany great again. You know? And the ideas of Aryan supremacy and Lebensraum were really popular with those Andalusian Germans who had lost faith. Here comes this guy saying, oh, you're German, right? You're part of the superior race. We should expand our territories so we can dominate the world. And you're like, hell yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to vote for this guy. I like him. So yeah, that was that. Then another factor is the whole hatred and fear of minority groups. So this ties in with the negative cohesion thing I said earlier. So they provided so many scapegoats. There were first the Jews, the communists, foreign powers, their own politicians. They just blamed everyone but themselves. They said, hey, yeah, we lost the war, but it's not our fault. It's the Jews' fault. It's the communists' fault. It's those November criminals. And they just blamed everyone but the people who were to blame, which were the army organization and the Kaiser. He didn't agree with the Kaiser, but he didn't criticize him, I don't think. And also, the Jews did get really criticized during this period because they ran successful businesses while the majority of German people weren't really doing well. And this was because they had become so marginalized in society previously that they just managed to do well for themselves. And then when everything came crashing down and they managed to stay in a good economical position, they remained there, and the people were really resentful, saying, "Hey, why do you have your successful businesses, and why do we not have them successful businesses?" And yeah, they were really jealous, and hey, we're gonna hate someone, we're gonna hate the Jews. And I still don't get why the Jews they haven't done anything. They don't deserve that much hatred. Also, they were in the first 6 months of 1932 alone, just 6 months, 84 Nazi deaths and 75 KPD deaths. So political assassinations were still going on. Germany was in a state of kind of anarchy and revolution, but not really. And the essay, Hitler was really smart about this, or Hitler or whoever it was. They organized stage battles. They would have these men, SA members, dressed in normal clothes, maybe with communist things, and they would start up fights, and then SA would come and just beat them up and win fights, which were completely staged. And so people said, "Oh wow, they're defending us against the real thugs out here in the street, the communists. We should fight. We should fight against the Nazis, who were seen as the bulwark against these communists." And yeah, those in rural areas, like people in the Wandervogel movement, they really liked his ideas, and they felt betrayed and felt alienated by the Weimar culture, the architecture, the music, the nightlife. And so here comes this conservative guy who says, "I'm going to restore everything to how it was before." So then he has thousands, if not millions, of new supporters. So then is the impact of the Great Depression, which arguably is the biggest factor out of all of them. So the German industry was really dependent on US loans. And of course, in 1929, the Wall Street crash happened. And so everything came crashing down. And industrial production dropped 40%. And millions of workers were laid off. So German industry had just recovered from the war, and it was at pre-World War I levels, 1913. And here comes this Wall Street crash and restores it to, it loses 40% of its production. That wasn't fun for the Germans, just catching up right now, and then everything came crashing down again. Imports and exports dropped. Germany was without basic food, basic necessities. They couldn't live. Basically, they had they had nothing. Had some things, but not everything they needed to live a comfortable life, which was then exploited by the Nazis, promising, if you signed up to the SA, you would get food and water and housing. So they exploited this. They set up hostels and soup kitchens to help the homeless and those starved by the Great Depression. So again, it's this political party who really cares about the people, who sets up these food kitchens, which I don't know what the impact they had, but they could have saved lives, a lot of them. Those people are going to be grateful, and then come elections, they're going to vote for the Nazis, the only party that really cared about them, right? If only the Weimar government had set up similar food kitchens and at least pretended to care about the people like the Nazis did. Of course, by 1932 or beginning of 33, there were 6.16 million unemployed, and these were really desperate and started to turn to more radical means and people who promised them jobs. The Nazis. They said, "Oh, we're going to restore many jobs. we're gonna end the poverty, we're gonna do a lot of things. And these people were really desperate. They had barely any money to eat. They couldn't live. So they saw this party who was really promising great things and voted for them. Married women at work were sent as double earners. So this was even before Hitler became like a notable political figure. It was just like even before that. So here comes Hitler. I'm saying that a lot, but here comes Hitler promising more traditional gender roles, and those people who were resentful by these working women, they're going to vote for the Nazis and Hitler. And yeah, they just really exploited all the Great Depression things. So it was in reality a combination of factors. The Great Depression, I'd say, is the most important one, which was used by propaganda. And then figures of veteran politicians also used propaganda. And then hatred and fear of minority groups, as well as the desire for a strong leader. All groups in the propaganda, but propaganda alone didn't just encompass everything. It was just the Great Depression really started things off. So by 1932, Hitler was the most significant political party in the Reichstag. So I'm gonna do a summary of the seats they had. By 1928, they had 12 seats, 2 of them being Goebbels and Goering. 1930, they had 107 seats. By 1932 July, they had 230 seats. And then by 1932 November, they had 196 seats. They were the party with the most seats in the Reichstag, so they couldn't be ignored. And here comes the famous backstairs intrigue. Bruning's government, he gained the reputation as the hunger chancellor because of his increased taxes, and he could only remain in office with the support of Hindenburg and von Schleicher. He really cut benefits and banned the SA in 1932, which was really unpopular with politicians, including Schleicher. Schleicher withdrew his support in April after the ban, and Brüning feared a Nazi uprising, as well as Schleicher. Schleicher was on the Nazi side, kind of, because he didn't want to be there when the Nazis came angry because of the SA ban. But Brüning also feared a Nazi uprising, and they consulted Hitler, and Hitler said, "Hey, guys, don't worry about it. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to not oppose a new government. But you're going to have to call a new election. And the SA is going to have to be allowed again." Brüning said, "No, I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to ask Hindenburg, hey, Hindenburg, can you, not unban the SA and not do the elections? Can you just, let me stay here by presidential decree?" Hindenburg said no. So Brüning resigned. He had no support, but Schleicher didn't support him. Hindenburg didn't support him. So he was basically alone. So then came von Papen. He was the next chancellor. This was after the July 1932 elections. So he established this government of national concentration and had a non-political party basis, with only getting support of the NVP, with 2 posts in the cabinet, and the rest were men who weren't even in the Reichstag. They had no support, and they ruled by decree, manipulating Hindenburg. This was called the Cabinet of Barons. He did agree with the Nazis in saying that the greatest threat to Germany was communism, but he didn't like the Nazis, although he did sympathize with them. But he was a politician by 1932. This is after July, so the Nazis had 230 seats in the Reichstag. They couldn't just not listen to Hitler because he was the biggest party. They couldn't do a coalition against him. They had to listen to him. So in June, this was just right before the July election. So they had 107 seats, which is still significant. So in June, he lifted the ban of the SA so he would gain Hitler's support, and imposed curbs on the left-wing press, so a bit of censorship. But a new wave of street violence came, and especially during the Reichstag election campaign of July 1932, And this gave Papen the excuse to establish a more authoritarian government, which he did, especially in Prussia. But this wasn't that popular, so then in July, come the elections, von Papen got voted out. So that was my mistake saying that this was after the July elections, this was before. So most moderate parties, except the CCP, lost votes. The KPD and the NASDAQ did gain a bit, but DVP, DDP, DNVP, maybe even SPD, they didn't lose too many votes, but they still lost to get a significant amount. And now the Nazis were the main right-wing party. So you were right-wing, if you wanted to get someone to power, you had to vote for the Nazis. But they didn't get votes from SPD, KPD, CCP, or left-wing voters. They got some, but not a significant amount. Goebbels knew he wouldn't get a majority this way, so he convinced Hitler to talk to von Papen. So they met in July, and von Papen said, "Hey, want to join my cabinet? You can stay with me and work with me in government. Not as chancellor, I would be chancellor, but let me win the elections and you can be right there." He was like, "No, I'm not gonna do that. I want to be chancellor. I don't want to be that. Like, I don't want to help you. I want to help myself." So he actually joined with the communists, and they made a vote of no confidence against von Papen, with Streicher as well, which was voted with a majority of 512 to 42. So von Papen was forced out. He lost the election. He lost the support of those in government. He was, again, like Bruning, he was alone. And in November, again, the Nazi seats, they did lose a bit because Hitler's attack on Papen, which was quite public, lost the support of many who supported Papen, so they lost quite a few votes there. Goebbels threatened to commit suicide. But NASDAQ did support communist transport strike, but they were basically out of funds. So von Papen's government, it collapsed, and he wasn't even a candidate by the November election. He was forced out of the Reichstag. He lost credibility in the army. He considered banning the Nazis and the communists, but he knew he would lose a lot of support, and he didn't even know if Hindenburg would allow it. So he left. And when Streicher said, "Hey guy, you don't have support, you're gonna have to leave." So here came Streicher, and he manipulated Hindenburg into appointing him as chancellor. Streicher was more behind the scenes, but because he had betrayed Papen, Hindenburg didn't fully trust him, so he was more like behind, and he thought, "Hey, if I'm gonna be chancellor and be successful, I need support. So I'm going to try and create a coalition with me at the top." But Hitler said no. Hitler constantly said no to any coalitions, and it did give the impression that Hitler had overplayed his hand. If he eventually said no, no one would appoint him as part of a coalition, so he would lose political support. So he said, "Okay, so Hitler's not gonna help. I'm gonna look into Strasser, the Nazi political leader. He was more in the left wing area rather than the right wing. And his progressive social policy would bring support from trade unions, but he did cancel his von Papen's cut to wages and help distribute areas and jobs, and gave some land to small farmers. But landowners and industrialists, they didn't like it. Trade unions didn't like it. So Streicher's like, "Hey, I didn't get any support from the Nazis. I didn't get any support from normal people or industrialists and elites. Can I have support? Please, can you suspend the constitution? Can you create a dictatorship?" And Hindenburg was like, "No." So Streicher resigned. Papen had been secretly negotiating with Hitler to form a little coalition themselves. So then the NVP supported this. Papen, Hitler, and Hindenburg's inner circle would join together, and so there was going to be a coalition with Hitler as Chancellor of Germany. Good. Only 3 Nazis were going to be allowed. Papen would be vice chancellor. Hitler wasn't gonna have a free hand. Hindenburg's son would run the food and economics ministries. Hitler was this uneducated guy who hadn't even graduated high school, and he would be really easily controlled. But obviously he wasn't. And then on the 30th of January of 1933, he was formally appointed as Chancellor and held his first cabinet meeting. So yeah, that was the factors that led to Hitler's astronomical rise to power. It was really fast and really clever to think about it. And then in our video, I'm going to talk about his consolidation of power and his establishment of a dictatorship. So if you had to put these in order, I'd say the most significant one would be the impact of the Great Depression, because if that hadn't happened, then the failures of Weimar politicians wouldn't have become so apparent. The propaganda couldn't have been as effective because they didn't have that much to go on. Narrative cohesion, again, propaganda, the type of strong leader propaganda. And the Baxter's intrigue, it was really, really successful, but that was only because it was like the trigger factor in Hitler was so powerful that they had to do it if they wanted to govern, and they manipulated Hindenburg and basically got away with it and established a chancellor that would go on to ruin the country. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching.